Hello, everyone. This is Old Man More Days from the community team at CK3, and today I'm going to be speaking the words of, well, a few different folks. We're going to start out with Jacob, our community manager, so here we go. This week's Dev Diary will be slightly different, as we're going to cover several different topics from several different authors. Key subjects are the Roman Restoration, the Fourth Crusade, and the addition of dynamically spawned historical characters once the game has actually started. We're going to start off with the new Roman Restoration content with Raise the Power, so we're going to hand that over to our resident Byzantine scholar now. You might remember Chad for the previous Dev Diary about Byzantia. Today, we'll be discussing one of the smaller updates we're making to the classic Restore Rome decision in Roads to Power. Even though they knew themselves as Romans, Byzantium was not the same as the Roman Empire that you could restore in-game. Furthermore, thoughts of restoring this idealized version of ancient Rome were not even common during our period. If you'd like to play a grand strategy game as the Roman Empire, may we point you towards a great one called Imperator Rome? We think you'd love it. It even recently had an update. With that aside, however, we'd like to show you some of the content we've updated for reconquering pieces of Rome's past. In Roads to Power, you'll get updated event content for conquering pieces of the historical Roman Empire. This is part of a great new feature from my colleague we're calling Important Locations that modders will likely be interested in. You can now script a relationship between a landed title and another higher tier title and fire content when they enter and exit the realm. These can be scripted on the fly as well, allowing for dynamic content about titles changing hands. We've updated how you can restore Rome as Byzantine with an eye towards how the Byzantines may have thought about such a thing, primarily through the lens of Justinian. With this comes gorgeous new art, as well as a new decision to make. We wanted to create an interesting choice here. There were concerns that this increase in difficulty might be perceived as too gamey, but we ultimately decided that restoring the ancient Roman Empire in the Middle Ages is already a gamey notion. Managing a massive empire like the de jure territory of Rome should be hard and create a new challenge for players. Of course, if it's too difficult to keep the whole enterprise together and functioning, you can opt for the historical decision to split it into East and West. Many historical emperors tried their best to maintain control over such a vast territory and failed, ultimately deciding on some variation of dividing power. Perhaps you will be the one to succeed in keeping the realm united, but as we said, it won't be a walk in the park. This also means that there is now a legitimate way to convert to Hellenism in-game. Upon reforming Hellenism, players have access to a new faith tenet called Household Gods. And with that, our household gods bid us to bid you a farewell, and we turn over to the words of Jason. So we started work on the fourth-ish crusade as something small and simple, but, and no one could have seen this coming, the subject matter proved a little complex and a little dramatic. It seemed to merit a whole hullabaloo. So, the Fourth Crusade in Crusader case will happen regularly, and it absolutely will prove a great and terrible threat to the Byzantine Empire. The Mongols are an apocalypse for all the world. The Latins are an apocalypse for the Greeks. Their empire stands tall, crumbles, or is succeeded by some hideous aberration based on whether this strange fight is won or lost. Okay, let's take a little look back in time. In 1202, Catholic lords and knights began gathering to retake Jerusalem in a new crusade. A number of these Western crusaders chose Venice as a starting off point. This involved a good bit of sitting and waiting for their fellow lords to show, and it soon became apparent few others were coming. But the Venetians still had to be paid in full. The first repayment effort involved sacking the Dalmatian port of Zara and staining their righteous swords in Christian blood. There, the Crusaders were joined by the Marquis de Montferrat, and with him, a claimant to the Byzantine throne, Alexios Agilis. Still low on funds, the Crusaders accepted an offer from this claimant. He promised them lavish support, money, and troops for the holy cause if the Crusaders would install him on his rightful throne. Though some dissenters instead departed directly for Jerusalem, the rest of the knights got on board for Constantinople. Bearing the same name of the would-be claimant, Emperor Alexios Agilos failed to fight off these foreigners. He was forced to abdicate in favor of the pilgrims' claimant. The new Emperor Alexios, however, seeing the impossibility of making good on his promises to the Crusaders, reneged on their deal. The capital was stormed and he overthrown. Yet another Emperor Alexios would soon meet the same fate, and after that, Constantinople was truly and historically ravaged by the Latin Crusaders. When the pillaging and slaughter was over, so too was the Byzantine Empire, at least for a time. The sort of Crusaders named their own Latin emperor, divided newly won Byzantine territories amongst themselves, and set out about the business of establishing their rule. Well, this is one of those cases where gamifying history means sort of choosing a narrative. It too means tourniqueting events somewhat, and adding a bit of dynamism as suits the sandbox of CK3. Now, we might ask, Jason, will the Fourth Crusade happen around 1202? The answer? No. It's most likely to happen from the 1178 start date, and fair warning, can happen very promptly, but it's possible from other start dates, though only once the Catholics are into their second or later crusade. Well, it's the Fourth Crusade, though. Not necessarily, and not in-game. We're not adding a counter that permits this story only once the number of crusades equals 4. No, in-game this is referred to as the Crusader War for Imperial Claim, or the Splintered Crusade. And it was hard to come up with a nice-sounding term that actually fit, if we're being honest. The dynamism of when this thing will strike is matched by it having relatively open ownership. You don't have to play the Marquis to introduce a wannabe Byzantine emperor to some Crusaders. You could pretty much be any European Catholic ruler who has a relationship to one such claimant at the right moment. This has kinda tipped our hand. The leader of the Splintered Crusade will be the above-named champion of the Byzantine aspirant. Putting this character at the helm centralizes authority over the Latin Crusaders more than is historical, yes, but it is a big plus for playability and agency. Oh, and the Splintered Crusade? It isn't actually a crusade. This thing is a big, fat, ugly limplet suckling off the underbelly of a proper Catholic crusade. Let's get into that. It begins with a Catholic crusade against the lands east of the Mediterranean. Sure, there's a Christian Byzantine emperor, but he's not involved in this Catholic initiative. Everything seems normal, and then some paltry little Catholic lord is hit with this. You opt in, and the unholy muck of Tartarus is gonna go down. Just not right away. As you wait for the crusade, that you will at least temporarily bail from, to launch, you're waiting to see who in Christendom is going to say, "You son of a biz, I'm in." The Pope will be the first to weigh in. This story would be incomplete without an avarice financier, and Venice, or the most Venice-y ruler available, fills that role. As the months pass, other Catholics pledged the crusade will instead pledge to join you. And then the crusade is launched, robbed of your Confederates. Y'all set off on a war of your own. The Byzantine Emperor will be fairly outnumbered, but all he needs to do is repel his attackers and this will be ended. If he fails though, now your claimant may choose to bankrupt the empire in order to properly pay off every crusader. More often than not though, he'll simply offer you a bribe to leave in peace. You can accept, of course, and may then even perhaps join the proper crusade with your well-earned reinforcements, if it isn't too late. But is anyone really going to leave in peace, though? Unlike in a normal crusade, you can choose to leave your old realm behind and gain the newly made Latin Empire title yourself. Or you can give it to a relative, or maybe you'll reward that kind, old, selflessly helpful Venice fella, just as the historical Crusaders almost did. Below the Latin Empire title are Greek duchies and counties distributed among the most powerful Crusaders. These rulers choose new holders for their assigned title, much like the Latin Emperor is chosen. The Latin Empire is born, Byzantium dies. Though not cleanly and not all at once. The collapse is scripted to prefer historicity, but it happens dynamically. The capital kingdom of the now destroyed Byzantine Empire will go to the Latins. The Venetian Seto de Mar claims some Byzantine maritime holdings, yet most of the Greeks do not bow to Latin dominion. Some mighty governors become administrative kings, while lesser magistrates claim feudal independence. A Crusader trait for these first Latin lords wouldn't be quite right. They've got a new one called the Spoiler of Byzantium instead, and it also makes their AI personality aggressive as hell. But how does all of this look to an unsuspecting Greek? Sweet God in heaven, the goat-brained Latins are... Okay, we're getting ahead of ourselves. The Byzantine emperor is the first to learn of the threat to come, and is given over a year to adequately gird his loins. For the rest of the empire, the cult of Rome strikes rather more suddenly. Then, if the foreign invaders aren't repelled... This is right as everything in Byzantium is falling apart. If you're powerful enough, you can now seize the title of despot and remain administrative. Otherwise, keeping your estate will mean pledging to another soon-to-be despot. Your alternative is going back to feudal. As for landless househeads, they should find themselves under one of the new Greek despots. In summation, their empire is a wreck, but this isn't game over for the Greeks. The world marches on. The Latin Empire faces some interesting choices in the early days of rule. In order to achieve maximum Crusader Kings III turmoil, the fall of Byzantium unlocks a new CB everywhere in the empire. Seize Imperial Duchy. You see, in this age of uncertain aftermath, any who possess Byzantine de jure land can lay claim on other such titles. And in a broken realm haunted by armed hosts, earning victory attracts armies to your banner. This should help stronger Latins, Turks, and Greeks in the region push their way to dominance. But what is de facto dominance without de jure righteousness? Latin emperors of sufficient legitimacy have a unique decision that lets them claim the kingdoms of Byzantium and the hearts of the Greeks one by one. And the Byzantines, when and if they manage to come back, can claw their kingdom titles back. Should they retake Constantinople and establish themselves well enough, the Restore Byzantine Empire decision gives the Greeks a pretty easy means to scrub out all this nonsense. But you know, it's just probably in time for the Mongols or the Ottomans or someone else to wipe them out for good. So let's now turn to the words of Ragier with a small feature coming with the free update. Something we felt the absence of for a long time are certain historical figures appearing in the game as it progresses. We're not talking about the likes of Frederick Barbarossa or Mansa Musa. Rulers and their kid are simulated with vast, branching dynastic trees. Divergences here are core to the game. No, we're talking about the great poets, scientists, scholars, commanders, and tricksters of history, those without a lineage of nobility to back them up. In the update following Roads to Power, you will see certain well-known historical figures appear across the map, which you can employ, or, in case you own Roads to Power, set out on an adventure as. Characters will appear in their historical place of birth, or our best approximation. Hildegard will appear in the Barony of Worms, for example. By default, you will only be notified if they appear in your domain or if they're extremely well known and you're the liege of any vassal holding that barony. This can be altered by means of game rules, should you wish. Now, it's no fun if these historical characters are too static. After all, no two games of Crusader Kings are the same, and in one game, the Barony of Worms might be of the Abadi faith and of Varanus culture, for example. Who knows? In any case, most of these characters will adapt to the faith and culture of their place of birth. As an example, here's Hildegard again, but with the setup that we already mentioned. All historical characters spawned this way have a snippet of information attached to them explaining who they were in real life. Sadly, we don't have this for historical landed rulers. Sorry. This snippet can be accessed from a widget near their opinion, and from their historical character trait. Of course, the destiny that they're going to have in your game is almost always going to differ from their historical one, but it's fun to compare with nonetheless. The historical character trait will actually help you find them by means of the character finder, should you desire to see who's around and what they're up to. So yeah, you could use that in order to invite them and land them as your vassals. If you're lucky enough to have one of these characters spawn in your realm, you have 3 options. You can choose to ignore them, should you not be in need of their services, or you can employ them and get an obligation hook. As mentioned, you can also abandon your dynasty and set out on an adventure as them. We think this is fair because it's just too cool to be able to go on an adventure as someone like William Wallace or Ibn Battuta, and it would be a crime not to offer you that opportunity. As the expansion focuses on Byzantium, we took extra care to add every interesting character that we could for Byzantium and their surroundings, which does mean that an extraordinary amount of characters will appear in Constantinople. At the start of 1066, no less than 2 well-known figures will make their appearance within a year or so. We tried to add as many interesting historical characters as we could to this new system, and we ended up with exactly 100 of them, spanning most of the map. There are many very well-known figures and some that are more obscure, but we're sure that will pique your interest when you see them. Here's a sample of some of them. Omar Khayyam will appear close to the 1066 start date. Perhaps you'd like to set out on a real journey as the famous Dante Alighieri. Or maybe you'd like to literally take Occam's razor to the throat of your enemies. This somewhat controversial pair will appear as lovers, and if you set out as an adventure as Heloise, Peter will join you. You didn't think we'd forget about the Norse, did you? Snorri here is the author of most of what we know about Norse mythology today. Many famous Jewish personalities, such as Rashi here, will appear across the map. And we're not forgetting about India. Here's Vidyapati, one of the most famous poets and scholars of the area. Rumi hails from a non-Persian area of Anatolia, and instead of appearing Greek or Turkish, will take his faith and culture from Balkh as a compromise. Several historical characters hail from one place, but take their faith and culture from another. Alright, not all of the characters are 100% historically verifiable like Jangar here, but if they could have existed and are interesting enough, why not? And some most certainly existed, but their stories were, how shall we say, embellished over the centuries. Anyone from Turkey here who recognizes this funny fellow? You might be familiar with a character named Varus, who is a very influential eunuch from a certain popular franchise. John here is the real-life inspiration for that character. As we mentioned, we've added 100 characters. Well, technically 101, but Heloise and Peter are a package deal, okay? And we have a full list in our dev diary that you can go and check out on the forums. Well, that's all we have time for this week. As always, thanks for your time and your attention. We'll be back next week to discuss the details of the new scheme system coming up in the free update alongside Roads to Power. Until then, if you have any questions or feedback, feel free to leave them in the replies and we'll do our best to address them. And of course, you can follow us here on YouTube to keep up to date on all matters related to Crusader Kings 3.